to look at how we actually alter the processing in the interface in my group policy management console. If I go back to my laptop's OU, as we saw a moment ago, the mobile security settings is precedence 1, and the other two policies, power options, default domain, I get those through inheritance. One of the things I can do is right-click the laptop's OU, and there is an option to block inheritance. This explains everything. Now, on my laptop's OU, when I look at group policy inheritance, the only policy that is now applying is the policy linked directly to the laptop's OU. So inheritance is turned off. I get no policies from the domain or any higher levels. And at any point, I could simply go back and turn off block inheritance. And you'll see the other two policies that are inherited from the domain, they just show back up in the list. Now, if I had a policy linked to the parent RTS Computers OU, that would be removed as well if I selected block inheritance, same as the ones from the domain. So any policy at any level above you would be removed when we block inheritance. If you disable block inheritance, they just reapply. Now, one of the other options is the enforced we referenced. Well, I'm going to right-click on my power options, and I'm going to choose enforced. Now, for whatever reason, it does not automatically update the view. So I'm just going to click refresh. We can see the change reflected. Power options moved itself to number 1, and I'm still on the laptop's OU, but it moved itself above the mobile security settings. That's all enforced actually does. It says I'm going to move myself to the highest precedence, which really means it's the last policy process and it wins any conflict. Nothing more than raising itself to the highest precedence, precedence number 1. And you'll also notice a lock icon, kind of small, but shows up on the policy. So in the interface, that's how you can just denote that it's actually an enforced policy. Now, if I unenforce that, I have to refresh the interface, but you'll see power options, enforced, it's number 1. When I refresh, it drops back to number 2, and now the policy at the OU level, my mobile security, goes back to being number 1. Now, interesting fact, a common question I get asked, what if I block inheritance at the laptop's OU level? So now I don't get the power options or the default domain policy, but then someone enforces one of these policies at a higher level. Well, if we refresh, notice it actually shows up. So even though I block inheritance, enforced actually overrides block inheritance and it shows up anyway. So now that policy would still apply. So you cannot block inheritance to escape or evade an enforced policy. But I'm going to undo all of those. So I'm going to turn off my block inheritance and I will unenforce this policy. Now everything is back to the way it started. Pretty fascinating. The last setting we're concerned with, security filtering. Now, as a segue into that, I'm going to open Active Directory Users and Computers. And in Users and Computers, we'll just create a few objects. Well, I'm going to go to my Sales OU. I already have a group named Sales-Users. Well, let's say you have a lot of other users that show up here. We'll say you have Ted Roberts as well. And we'll say just lots of users. Some of these users are members of the sales users group, some are not. Well, if I open this group, sales users, and go to members, you'll see Bob Ross is a member of this group. Ted is not a member. So the scenario we're in, someone comes to us and says, well, I want to create this new policy and some of my sales users need it. Some of my sales users do not need it. What can we do? Well, you cannot link a policy to a user, a computer, or to a group. Has to be local site domain or OU. If you link it to the sales OU, by default, every user in the sales OU actually gets it. So Bob would get it, Ted would get it, and every other user. What I want is only for certain users to get it. So a way to do that, I could take an existing group, or you create a new group, maybe explicitly for this reason, and all the users that need that setting, make sure they are a member of this group. So here are my sales-users. We'll use that group. So if you need it, you're in that group. Well, now if I go back to group policy, and what I'm going to do is right-click my sales OU, and I'm going to create a GPO and link it here. So now I will name this sales user settings, and we'll just say OK. So now I have the policy. Now we could say you define whatever settings you want in the policy itself, but for the security filtering, you'll see authenticated users shows up here. So something to keep in mind, for group policy to apply to you, two things have to be true. One, you have to be under the scope of the policy. So if this policy is linked to the sales OU, for any user configuration setting, it means your user count has to be in the sales OU. If we are looking at computer configuration settings, your computer count has to be under the sales OU. If not, it simply does not apply to you. For example, if I define computer configuration settings in a GPO linked to the sales OU, but your computer is in this laptop's OU, you don't get any of those settings because they do not apply to a location where your account is actually contained. So I want this to apply only to user accounts, say in the sales OU, but only ones that are a member of that sales users group. Well, right now, authenticated users is here. Now, the name of this group is quite misleading. Well, first, an authenticated user is every user that has logged on successfully. The act of you logging on makes you a member of authenticated users. So if you've logged in, you are a member of that group. I could not add you to it. I cannot remove you out of it. Just log on, you're in that group. This is called a special identities group, meaning membership is just inclusive by default. But it also contains computer accounts. When your computer account powers up, it authenticates against Active Directory, and it becomes a member of this authenticated users group as well. Now, this group really should have been named Authenticated Users and Computers, but perhaps that was too many letters. I don't know. But it does contain user accounts and computer accounts that have authenticated. So what I can do, because I don't want this to apply to every user, every computer in that sales OU, I'm going to actually add that sales users group. Now, I have to remove authenticated users because that's still there. So when I remove authenticated users, now we just get this pop-up here saying group policy requires each computer account to have permission to read GPO data from a domain controller to use group policy. Saying removing this may prevent policies from working. Well, we're fine because we are looking at this just from a user point of view. What that message is trying to say, and it could have done a better job, but it's trying to say that you don't have computer accounts defined in this group. And if you don't have them defined, then none of the computer configuration settings apply to any objects. So just trying to help you out, saying, be aware that removing this can cause some things not to work. But now, you have to be a member of the sales users group, and your user account does have to be under the sales OU. If both things are true, that policy will apply. So in my case, when we look in Active Directory again, Ted Roberts is not a member of this group. Bob Ross is a member. So Bob will have this policy apply. Ted will not. So that block inheritance, enforced, and security filtering are our ways to alter the default group policy processing to really customize it to exactly what our needs are. I can configure the same setting from the computer point of view as well. I'm going to navigate back to Active Directory users and computers. I have my sales users group I created. Well, now I'll create a group, and I'm going to name it sales-computers. And for this group, I'm going to make my RTS Client 01 a member of this group. So I'll just right-click that, add to a group. I'm going to type SA and check names. and you'll see sales computers shows up. And I'll click OK for that. And OK. Tells me that was successful. Now, if I go back to group policy, under security filtering, I already have the sales-users. If I add, and I'll type SA again, and we'll just search by clicking check names, I'm going to choose my sales computers group and OK. Now, if your computer account is a member of the sales computers group, this policy would also apply. So if we have computer configuration settings defined, sales computers that are a member of that group would actually get those settings as well. So same concept when we want these filtered based on our user account, or if we want these filtered based on computer accounts.